According to the U.S. Census Bureau, folks, by 2023, we're going to have a significant issue when it comes to households of color, when it comes to, well, actually 2043. Despite the growth of minority households outpacing white households, there's been virtually no closure in the wealth gap between them. And so, in an effort to shrink the wealth gap, the nonprofit organization Prosperity Now has launched the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative. Joining us right now to discuss this is Diedrich Asante Muhammad, a senior fellow of the Racial Wealth Divide for Prosperity Now. So exactly what is this initiative?
So with this initiative is we have three main things we're doing. One, we're trying to highlight the reality of racial wealth inequality, what that means for the entire country. Two, we're doing projects across the country with a heavy focus on trying to strengthen nonprofit institutions that are very important community assets that we think are at the center of wealth building. And three, we also work throughout the entire organization of Prosperity Now to help with all the different asset development work, from home ownership to child savings accounts to a host of policy issues.
And so when it comes to closing the gap, obviously home ownership is a huge key, but just the other day, Time Magazine had a piece that showed that that millennials care less about marriage as well as home ownership and more about health care and education. So that's an issue, because you can care about those issues, but most folks build their wealth through ownership.
No, that's right. About 65% of wealth for those in the middle quintiles of income get their wealth from home ownership. But we can see with millennials, because they are getting married older and because they're having serious issues around jobs, that I understand why they'd be concerned about health care. Because there is a wealth building ladder. You do need job, regular pay, some decent benefits in order to build up and get to the space where you're ready for home ownership.
But the other thing is that this whole deal of mobility, because at the end of the day, again, most people, which has been the way for years, that is, you buy a home, you live in a certain place. That's what has provided the capital for African Americans. No home, no loan, no business. And so, if you're looking to be an entrepreneur, if you don't have that, then where are you now sort of getting that capital to launch something of your own?
That's right, because most people do not get loans for their businesses from a bank or what have you. It has to be from themselves or friends and family. And we also have to recognize that African Americans have never been majority homeowners, and that's been a long-term challenge for us. Well, whites have a home ownership rate of a little over 70%. So we're still working on that front, but we're also still working on the employment front. African Americans have had twice the unemployment rate of whites since 1963. That's been consistent. So again, that's what we try to highlight, is how economically insecure people of color, African Americans and Latinos are, and how that's going to have a huge effect by 2043 when we're a substantial part of the population.
Brother Diedrich, I read in a Washington Post article, it talked about how white families are now at about a median income level of about $171,000, 10 times as much as blacks and Latinos, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, how did we get to this point? I mean, I know that in your particular report, you said, I think, that by 2026 or so, that there's going to be this huge gap.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is talking more so about the wealth level of whites. Right now, that's about $141,000. The median wealth for blacks is $4,000. Right. The median wealth for Latinos is $6,000. Right. So there is this massive gap that isn't bridging, and that's one thing we try to highlight. A lot of people, when they talk about race relations, they say, you know, we're going in the right direction. We just haven't gotten there yet. But in terms of economics, we're not even going in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. As we look at the interplay between race and socioeconomic status, what do you think is the role of this movement around banking black? And what do you think can be propelled through banking black?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the importance of banking black, you know, generally is having a serious understanding of how economics is at the foundation of racial inequality. And I think, you know, that is part of it. We have to build up our black banking institutions, but we also need to kind of bank black within ourselves and try to understand, you know, are we on a path of trying to build wealth, and that wealth not being a luxury car, but wealth being $500 in your savings account, having a job with a matched 401k. These are steps toward building wealth. It has to have a long-term building.
So let me ask you this question. You talked about housing. A lot of people, I guess, over the past couple of years have focused on how housing policies, specifically now, have sort of isolated poor people. So regardless of race, if you're poor, you don't see a lot of affordable housing. You talked about that connection to wealth. Talk about what we need to do policy-wise, or at least put pressure on legislators to pass policy that focus on building more affordable houses in urban, rural communities.
Well, no, that's an important piece, too. There's housing and there's home ownership, ownership and there's affordable housing. And we need both of those. I mean, whites didn't become majority homeowners until there was a massive government investment and allowed you to have pretty much subsidized home ownership. We haven't done that for really African Americans and Latinos, because when that happened in the 40s and 50s, there was still massive segregation. So it will need to be massive federal policy to really create home ownership so that blacks and Latinos can be majority homeowners for the first time, because that is the basis of the middle class. But you also need to have affordable housing for renters as well.
So, Brother Dietrich, what's the landscape right now? I mean, it doesn't sound like in terms of our community, we're in the best financial shape at this point. And I know we're talking about home ownership. I know we're talking about entrepreneurship, and I keep hearing the same messages all over all the time. At this point, is there a clear path right now? Because it seems like the message is being lost in translation and getting to the folks that need to make some of the changes.
Well, the clear path is growing and concentrated inequality. Like, that's the clear path.
So do we need to address inequality issues first and then work on economic issues? Well, or does it have to be like a two-tiered or multi-pronged approach?
Well, sure, and I focus on economic inequality, right? So when I'm thinking of addressing inequality, I'm thinking of addressing economics. I don't think you'll ever really bridge. I think this is why in 2017 we still have such racial divisions, because the country's never been willing to deal with the economic foundation, which is always the foundation of racial inequality in this country.
All right, then. Well, we certainly appreciate it. Where can folks get more information about the initiative?
Sure, they can go to prosperitynow.org. They can check out our Facebook page, Bridging the Racial Wealth Divide.
All right, thanks a bunch.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh, my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.